Hello everybody. I'm Daniel Ruefman, and this is my new vlog, Writing with Ruefman. What I wanted to do this summer, to kind of start doing this blog regularly, I wanted to work towards a goal. And the goal for me would be overcoming imposter syndrome. Right? We all have these moments where we're thinking we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we don't have ideas that are adequately developed to write and engage and create good art, right? That's that inner voice, that imposter inside of us all telling us that we can't do it, right? And we listen to that voice a little too often, right? Regardless of the stage of your career, there are people who have published a lot of books, and they still have those moments of imposter syndrome where they're just waiting for that next idea to die and flop, and they're not going to be a writer anymore. You have novice writers, people who are just getting started. I teach at a mid-sized university in the Midwest, and my students have this imposter syndrome where they're just starting out, and they're saying, you know, I read Neil Gaiman, I read Margaret Atwood, and I read Toni Morrison, and I have no ideas that can compare to anything that they write. And my goal as an instructor is to teach them to shut off that voice, because I think you have better ideas than you give yourself credit for. Most people I've met have memories and experiences that can fuel stories that are just as good, every bit as good, as people who are publishing regularly, the people who are dominating the space. And my goal for this blog is to help you overcome that imposter syndrome, wipe it off the map, and begin to do something productive, so that way you can begin to develop as a writer, freed from that ball and chain, all right? Take away the self-doubt. Let's do something practical, some practical activities, some tangible exercises that hopefully will allow you to transcend this moment and leave that imposter behind for forever. Okay, so let's get started. The first question that I wanted to engage with this blog is, where do your ideas come from? This is a question that's been posed to every writer since the beginning of time, all right? I don't care if you're Charles Dickens or whether you're Jane Austen back in the 17th and 18th centuries, you have been asked this question, where do these ideas come from, right? And a lot of writers give you snarky answers. They don't really tell you because they're afraid to share it, right? If they share it, the ideas go away and they're no longer a writer, right? I wanted to get past the snark because I'm a teacher, right? I'm an instructor in addition to a writer. And so my goal is to eliminate the snark and give you something more practical. So, where do my ideas come from? I'll tell you. I generally get my ideas for poems and stories from one of two departments, one of two areas: memories and new experiences. All right? Memories are those old experiences that have happened a long time ago. We're separated from them by time and space and perspective, right? Our memories can be fairly recent, they can be more distant, they can be from our childhood, but these memories are very fertile, seeds that you can use, you can invoke, you can bring them along. And those memories can fuel story ideas and poem ideas that are engaging and accessible and that strike a note with your audience. New experiences are things that you're going through now, more recently, things that are taking place in the moment, right? So maybe I have this memory that I want to explore. That memory is a little bit shady. Sometimes I'm not 100% sure how accurate my memory is when I talk about something that happened when I was a kid. Because there's so much time, there's so many things that have happened since, and I've told the story many times, and I've self-edited each time I've told that story about something that happened to me as a child. And because the more I've told the story, the more I've self-edited, the more that memory has evolved into something else that's less reliable, right? But my new experiences help to put those memories into perspective, okay? Case in point, 3 years ago, I lost one of my children. My twins, one of my twin boys died. And when we lost my son, I have a memory. I have very vivid, tangible, difficult memories of that time period in my life. I have new experiences that have been inserted, that have kind of overlaid those memories and have given me perspective. So over the past 3 years, the memories that I have experienced from that point have evolved by the new parenting experiences. He was a twin. I've raised his twin brother for the last 3 years, right? And this experience of parenting has given me perspective and appreciation for memories, even painful and very devastating memories. And it's that cross-pollination between those new experiences that help give me perspective to interpret and to understand those memories at a new level, okay? And so that's one of the most raw examples I can give you. Other memories that I have, when I was a kid, I was in high school, I was running track, and we did stupid stuff all the time. And now, as a parent, I'm experiencing my kids doing things that are kind of stupid all the time, right? And any parent can identify with those. Those new experiences give context to the things that you look back on and say, oh, how did I ever survive childhood, right? The new experiences cross-pollinate with memories, and what you get in there is this really fertile land that can produce really interesting things. And then you have that third area. Once you have something percolating in memories and new experiences, you have imagination. These are the questions that we ask to bring things to the next level, that punches things up to the next level, okay? And so, for an example, the question, what if? Is a particularly potent one. This is one that a lot of teachers, a lot of writers go to just start things rolling, to start the ball rolling, right? And not saying that it's going to be necessarily the end all the end all for that story or that idea, but it does help to kind of get things percolating, get things moving. And once things start moving, they get momentum and things will happen, right? So you have these three areas: memories, experiences, and then you engage those with your imagination. And it's in those areas of confluence, those areas where everything comes together, that something happens. And we start to have something that could be a story or a poem or a novel or even nonfiction that we're writing, okay? So to give you an example out of my own life, a few years ago, I had a short story called Service. It was published in a literary magazine called the Sheepshead Review, right? The Sheepshead Review is a literary magazine that's hosted by University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, I believe. But their magazine, Service, their magazine, the Sheepshead Review, published Service back in, I think, 2015. And from that story, I can kind of identify a few threads that have been kind of woven into this whole idea, right? I was married years ago. I had this memory. Honeymoon drive. We're going to this couple's resort. Gonna have a good time. We're almost running out of gas. We're in upstate New York. Funny thing about New York, you have a lot of big open spaces in between the big population centers, right? And we got along this stretch of road, running out of gas. There's no gas station in sight, right? Luckily, eventually we found a gas station in this old town that had these busted up pumps from like the 1980s that had the numbers that went as opposed to a digital reading. It's this analog pump that was just out of time, right? But we used that old pump, got some gas, we were able to continue on, no harm, no foul. But I had this memory, running out of gas on our honeymoon. And then you have this old pump, this old gas pump. And that's where the idea starts. It starts with this memory. Now, I had several new experiences, right? So when I went on the honeymoon, when we were there at the new experience, we've gone to vacations since then, and we experience, let's say, buffets, right? We go to a buffet. We go to hotel, and we had this experience of a self-serve kind of motel thing. You go to the motel, you check in, you do a self check-in. Maybe you see somebody, maybe you don't, but you can kind of do that. You get your own key, and then you go and you can get into your hotel apartment or whatever, your room. And so you start getting this self-service thing. Self-service is now, buffets are self-serve. I had this motel that, we never saw the person that was checking us in until we checked out and all that stuff. It was just a bizarre experience to have this self-serve kind of economy that's being built up around us. You go to Airbnb now. You can check into a room or an apartment, right? You book your reservation, you go there. You don't have any physical interaction with anybody. You just go on to the app, make your reservation, plug in your credit card number, and now you're staying in this stranger's house, this stranger's apartment, and you might not ever see anybody else doing that, right? So you have this self-service kind of experience going on in the world. It bumps into my honeymoon idea, and I think, okay, so what happens if I end up in this little town with the old pumps? What if the old pumps became visual pumps? Those are the pumps from the 1950s-ish, maybe older, 20s, 50s, somewhere in there. These are the pumps that had the globe, so that when you pumped, you literally pumped the gas into the globe. You could see it. It allows you to make sure that you didn't have a whole lot of impurities. It allowed you to check the color of the gasoline, all that good stuff, right? It made sure you didn't have sediment that was going into your tank. So what you do is you pump up the globe, fill up the globe. You could see all of that stuff floating around up there, and then you open a valve and it pours the gas into your car, right? Those are the high-vis pumps. Go ahead and Google them sometime. So what happens if I pull in, what happens? What if I pulled up to this old gas pump, and instead of it being an analog pump, now it's a high-vis pump, right? And what happens if that whole town was built on this self-service model that we have that's similar to Airbnb and all that stuff? They have a buffet that instead of having a basket for tips, it's the basket that you leave your trade or your cash in to pay for the buffet, right? So you have this self-service economy where you're not interacting with anybody. You have these visual pumps from the 1950s that are just out of something from the Twilight Zone. And it intersects with my experience on my honeymoon trip, almost running out of gas in upstate New York. And what happens if we did run out of gas? What happens if we were basically out of gas and we rolled up gas, like the engine cuts out just as I pull up to this visual pump? The visual pump doesn't have a credit card reader. I don't have any cash. I only have credit cards, right? So I'm here at this visual pump, no credit cards. I have to pay cash. There's not even an ATM anywhere so I can get cash. What happens? And that's where this story service comes from. It comes from that honeymoon trip, bumping into this self-service economy, bumping into some of these questions I had at the moment. Okay? And that's where that story comes from. So, that gives you a rough idea of how my writing process happens. I have memories, I have new experiences, they bump into each other, I engage with questions, and then I have a question. Then I have a story. I will link this entire story. I have the galleys, I believe, at least for that story. I will link those below. So if you were curious and you want to see how that story turned out, go ahead and take a look. But that's essentially what we have here. Where do my ideas come from? My ideas come from these moments of confluences, these places where these ideas interact and cross-pollinate. And it's this cross-pollination that creates wonderful story ideas or opportunities, right? Not necessarily saying that every opportunity is a good one or that every opportunity must happen, right? It doesn't necessarily say that you start writing something and it has to go somewhere. But hopefully that gives you a rough idea of how my writing process happens. How do I go about this idea? So go ahead and read service if you want to. And you might be asking yourself, well, how do I get started? Well, here are my tips, my recommendations. I use notebooks. Inevitably, wherever I'm going, I always have a notebook on me. I can go into my bag here. I can pull out a notebook. I can pull out several, actually. I have little notebooks. I have big notebooks, right? But what do these notebooks, what purpose do they serve? Well, the notebooks allow me to preserve general ideas. Anytime I have a thought that kind of starts percolating, I go ahead and I write it down. Sometimes it's a story idea, sometimes it's a poem. But in this notebook, I'm able to preserve a lot of ideas that would otherwise just get lost, right? Because we have so many experiences every day, and sometimes we can't keep them all straight. So, what would I do? I take my writer's notebook, turn a few pages in, you write the heading Memories. Turn 5 or 10 pages further back, write the heading New Experiences. Then turn a little bit more, and then questions or imagination, right? And what you're going to do is today, over the course of the summer, go ahead and just write down memories. Brainstorm them, 10, 15 minutes a day. Go out there and in your notebook, create a list of memories. Good memories, bad memories, indifferent memories, it doesn't matter, just memories. Create the list. Things that just kind of pop up, things that are fertile enough to still be there, right? After you have a list of memories, go into the new experience. And every time you experience something new, this last weekend my wife and I took the kids to a water park. Before that, there was a 4th of July carnival in our hometown. And we went and experienced these things. So after you experience things, at the end of every day for the next couple of weeks, list things you're doing or have done in the last couple of days, right? You create those lists of new experiences and you start to say, hey, these memories kind of bump into these experiences. I have some crazy memories from my high school days, running amok in the country. And now I am a parent raising kids who are running amok in the country. And now I have perspective that allows me to kind of interrogate my own childhood self and say, what were you thinking, right? Maybe that's my starting point. After you have a list of memories, and after you have a list of things that you're currently doing, a list of experiences, so to speak, you go into the questions. The what ifs. The what happens next. Who intervenes? These are all questions that you can explore. Make sense? And hopefully, after you've created that list of memories, the list of these new experiences, and these questions, start to overlay them, like this Venn diagram. See which ideas kind of bump into each other here. See which questions kind of help bring those ideas to fruition. And try to explore those areas of cross-pollination where those ideas intersect. And I think, if you're careful, and if you're looking for it, you might find an acorn that could grow into something. If you have any questions, go ahead and post those in the comments, or feel free to contact me on Twitter. Otherwise, happy writing, and I hope to see you online.